Alrighty, let's continue in our Greek myths. We are on lesson 3, learning about Demeter and Persephone. Before we get into our read aloud, let's look at our vocab words already. We have 2 of them. I will read the word, you repeat it after me. Spectator, amusing. So if I found something that was kind of funny, what word would I use? What does spectator mean? Again, here we go. Let's do a quick little thumb up, thumb down game. So if this is a characteristic, remember that word characteristic means part of. So if this is a characteristic of a Greek tale, put your thumb up. If it is not, put your thumb down. So Greek myths are non-fiction stories about real things that have happened. Now that's our thumbs down. Greek myths are fictional stories. Yep, they are fake. Greek myths tried to explain things in nature. Thumb up. Remember, our last read aloud tried to explain how humans were created and how all these bad things happen. Greek myths teach a moral lesson. Yes, thumbs up. Greek myths only have mortal characters. No, thumbs down. They also have immortal characters. We're going to hear about more immortal characters in our today's read aloud. What do you think this myth tries to explain about nature? Let's take some guesses. What do you think this myth tries to explain? Well, as you listen, let's listen for the purpose of this myth and identify what this myth does try to explain. And let's demonstrate the understanding of the word retrieve. Again, let's listen to today's read aloud and hear what this myth tries to explain. As you have learned, the ancient Greeks believed that there were many gods and goddesses responsible for the workings of the world. There was Poseidon, the god of the sea, Ares, the god of war, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love, to name a few. Demeter was the goddess, she's right here. Demeter was the goddess of the harvest and agriculture, or farming. It was because of her the ancient Greeks believed that fruits hung heavy on the trees, wheat grew in the fields, and vegetables ripened on the ground. Demeter had a daughter named Persephone, who was the joy of her life. Persephone was known by all the gods and goddesses of Mount Olympus as a beautiful girl, just like her mother. And like her mother, she was full of happiness, warmth, and light. As long as the two were together, it was summer year-round. Summer the whole time. Some days, Demeter would take Persephone with her to tend the crops in the field. On these days, Demeter would work among the crops, and Persephone would play in a nearby field of flowers, picking bouquets. One of such day, Persephone strayed farther and farther away from her mother, until, humming a little tune, Persephone was far out of Demeter's sight. Now, Persephone was not just known by the gods and goddesses on Mount Olympus. Hades, Zeus's brother and god of the underworld, had also taken notice of her. As god of the underworld, Hades lived underground and oversaw all of the souls of the dead. He and his three-headed dog, Cerberus, saw to it that none of the dead escaped back to the land of the living. Hades had fallen in love with Persephone, and the king of the underworld wanted to make her his queen. On that day, as Persephone drifted away from her mother, Hades harnessed his 4 black horses and to his golden chariot. As Persephone bent to pick up one last flower, she could hear the faint sounds of hooves beating. Persephone stood up and looked around. As she did, Hades tore open the ground that separated the underworld from the land of the living and grabbed Persephone. He spirited her away, back to the underworld, in his chariot. The word spirited means carried her off mysteriously or secretly. Why did Hades spirit Persephone away? As the sun began to set, Demeter finally stopped her working in the fields. Persephone, she called out, ready to take her daughter home. There was no answer. Thinking that Persephone had not heard her, she called out again, Persephone! Demeter heard nothing but the chirps of the evening crickets, and then she began to worry. Demeter searched all night, calling for her daughter. Persephone! Persephone! But no matter where she looked or how loudly she called, she could not find Persephone. As the night wore on, Demeter began to look older. Wrinkles formed on her face, her body grew crooked, and she moved more and more slowly. By the time the sun came up the next day, Demeter was no longer full of happiness, warmth, and light, but was a bent old woman. How do you think Demeter feels? In her night of searching, Demeter had not found Persephone, and so she turned to the sun god, Helios, who during the day sees all, and asked for help. "O Helios," Demeter said, "have you seen my daughter Persephone? Do you know where she has gone?" "Hades has taken her down into the underworld to be his queen." Upon hearing this, Demeter began to despair, give up hope. How was she ever to retrieve or bring back her daughter now? Demeter began to weep for her lost daughter, and in her sadness, she forgot to tend the crops in the field. The grass turned brown, the wheat stopped growing, and soon there was no more food on the earth for the animals and people to eat. Every tree, vine, and field was bare. Even the gods received no more offerings, for the people did not have any food or meat to spare. After some time, Zeus saw that the people would starve if something was not done. Only the gods and goddesses could go to the underworld and then leave. So Zeus traveled to the underworld to persuade Hades to let Persephone go. Persuade is another way to say persuasion, which we heard in that last read aloud. What does persuade mean again? Yeah, to convince. "Hades," he said, "if you do not return Persephone to her mother, Demeter, nothing will grow on earth again. The people will starve." Why is nothing going to grow on earth again? Unless Persephone returns. "I will gladly return her," Hades said, "if she hasn't eaten anything. You know the rule, Zeus. Whoever eats of the food of the underworld or drinks of its water must stay forever." Zeus and Hades looked at Persephone, waiting for an answer. Had she eaten the food of the underworld? Persephone began to cry. "I ate 6 pomegranate seeds," she said. So a pomegranate is a reddish fruit that has many seeds in it. "A rule is a rule." But Zeus knew that if Persephone remained in the underworld, nothing would grow on the earth again. So he made a deal with Hades. "For each of the seeds she has eaten, Persephone will stay 1 month in the underworld as your queen. For the rest of the year, however, she will live on earth with her mother, Demeter." So how many seeds did she eat? How many months then will she have to stay in the underworld? How many months is that in the year? Yeah, so half the year she's in the underworld, half she's on earth. And so it was. For 6 months of the year, Demeter and Persephone were happy together. Fruits and wheat and other plants sprouted from the ground, and it was spring. As they grew bountifully, the world was bright, and it was summer. During those 6 months that Persephone lived in the underworld, however, Demeter would ignore all the crops of the fields and would pine for or long for her daughter. The leaves would fall off the trees in autumn and would be bare in winter. While Demeter longed for her daughter, once Persephone returned to Demeter, it would be spring again. All right, so let's go through our comprehension questions from this read aloud. Who were the characters in this read aloud, or in this Greek myth? Why does Hades spirit Persephone away? How does Demeter feel when she realizes Persephone is missing? How do you know she feels that way? Hades returns Persephone, but only for part of the year. Why? So what does this myth try to explain in nature? Yeah, this myth tries to explain the 4 seasons so if Demeter is in the underworld, what 2 seasons are happening? Fall and winter. And when she's up on Earth, what 2 seasons are happening? Spring and summer. Now we know from science that it's the Earth's tilt, and the way the sun is hitting the Earth is the way seasons are happening. But this is how they tried to explain the seasons. And our word for today is the word retrieve. I will say the word, you repeat it after me. Retrieve. What is the vowel IE saying in this word? Why would this be a tricky word? Yeah, because we learned before IE makes that I sound, but it's making an E sound. What do you think retrieve means? Retrieve means to rescue or bring back. So I love this picture of a dog playing fetch, a golden retriever. But the dog playing fetch is going to get the ball and retrieve it and bring it back. Andre left his sweater in the classroom and had to retrieve it before going home. Have you ever had to retrieve something before? And we're going to look at our Greek myth journal today. Fill out your journal with some complete sentences talking about today's myth. Yeah, one big thing is, what did this myth try to explain in nature? We will continue with our Greek myths tomorrow with another fun story. Stay tuned.